All right. So how they say, a Mensch tracht und Gott lacht. Everybody makes plans, but then I really thought we were going to finish off the psukim of Zion today, but that is not going to happen. In fact, I don't even know if we're going to do justice to the one, maybe two, but really one verse we're going to focus on today. This is a very, very deep and nuanced concept. But I'm going to do the best of my ability, and hopefully you'll all walk away enriched, educated, and elevated. So we're at chapter 119. We're going through the verses of Zion, and we're going to briefly dwell on verse 53.
Which page is that? 148.
And then we're going to go to verse 54. And that's going to be the primary emphasis will be on verse 54. Now remember, David HaMelech, in this collection of verses, is talking about the pressures that he functions under from all kinds of external duress, all kinds of challenges and issues. And that's what we learned about in the previous verses. So here David HaMelech, surrounded by all these nefarious individuals, says, Zal'afa achazasni. Beginning of verse 53, trembling seizes me. Mereshoyim eizvei teirasecha. From the wicked who abandon your Torah. Now this could be understood in two ways. If you take a look in the Ibn Ezer, as well as in the Radak, the emphasis on David HaMelech's fear or trembling, which is the way most of the Pashtunim understand this to be, is when he looks at people who have abandoned Hashem and abandoned the Torah, and David HaMelech knows that life is but a temporal reality, and that ultimately you have to deal with a bigger picture. And he says, I can't even imagine the hell that awaits these people. Like, these people are destroying themselves. So David HaMelech is trembling, not in fright, but almost in pity, almost seeing something which is tragic. You can see a person who's destroying their lives, and it makes you tremble. It freaks you out. So, for example, sometimes, and we see this, you see a person who becomes a drug addict, chas v'shalom, or is addicted to some other kind of very, very unhealthy or bad behavior. And you're watching a person literally destroy their own life. And it's shocking. And then you could see a person that you meet them months or even years later, and you remember the way they used to be, what they used to have, what they've done to themselves, and it shakes you up. It shakes you to the bone when you see how bad somebody could be to themselves and how terrible the result of this could be. So that's the one approach of Zol'afa Achazasni. David HaMelech is seized because he understands the beauty and because he appreciates the wonderment of Torah. When he sees people abandoning the Torah, it's something that is disconcerting, deeply, deeply devastating to him. He's seized with trembling. Another more, I think, literal or straightforward read is the way the Metzudas David explains it, that David HaMelech says, I was seized by trembling. It's a lot of problems I got. I'm under a lot of pressure. I'm being attacked from all sides. And this pressure from around me, it caused me fright. I mean, it's only human. So he has global or international pressure being brought to bear. He's dealing with affairs of state, and he's not having an easy time of it. And he has problems internally and externally, even have problems in his own family. So because he's dealing with so many problems, it caused him to shake or to tremble. Now, the way we understand from Metzudas David leads us very naturally into the next verse, which is Zmiris Hayu Lichukecha. So your statutes were like music for me, or like songs. The Beis Megurai, in my house of wandering. I'm just translating that loosely, as we're soon going to see going into the details. So if we say Zalafa al-Chazasni is about David HaMelech's fear for others, so that fear is not so hard to calm. I mean, you see something, you see somebody ruin their lives, you calm your fears. But when you're under pressure, and when you're being attacked, and that causes you to have trembling and fear, and you don't feel that you have a handle on your life, and you're able to calm yourself, and you're able to find inner solace and peace, because you're listening to different music, you're hearing the song of the Torah, then it's much more profound in a certain way. It leads more naturally into the next verse. At any rate, that's the introductory verse. The really primary focus of today's class is going to be on this pasuk, Zemiros hayu lichukecha. This is the first and the only time in the entirety of the Apocrypha of the Jewish people, entire Tanakh, that the Torah, the chukim of the Torah, the statutes of the Torah, are metaphorized as songful or music. There is, to be sure, a parsha in the Torah, which is called a shira, and the shira is called Hazinu. It's the second to the last portion of the Torah, and it's Moshe Rabbeinu's final song or poem to the Jewish people. And it is said that it's all a song, but there are many unhappy rises and rests in that song. And that's a question in and of itself. How does that become a song? How does that become music? It would seem to be anything but music. Much of that prophecy is very harsh, very difficult, very painful to listen to. Okay, so we have this idea that life can be a song and that Yiddishkeit makes music for us, but never before or after in the written Torah do we actually find the scripture referred to in songful fashion, or the Torah, the chukim, the statutes, or halachot of Torah referred to as music. So we really need to understand this. And then, on a secondary level, in order to understand why David HaMelech saw this as a songful solace, we also would have to understand from what was the solace, what was the issue, what was the problem, and why and how was it that the song of chukim, the song of statutes, was able to be pleasing music and calming for David HaMelech, how it was able to soothe him in these difficult times. So I'm going to share with you no less than 4 different opinions of the major Rishonim. There are more, but 4 general opinions of the major Rishonim, and I'm going to try to share it with you, as they say, min hakal el hakaved, from the lighter, or the circumstances, situations where one would need less solace, to the circumstances where one would need more soothing or solace. And then we're going to take a look at the actual idea of the songs. So let me just preface by saying that when we speak of the song here, it is not a natural song. It's not organic music. What I mean to say is that if somebody were to hear music being played, you don't have to tell him, oh, that's music. He knows that's music. Maybe some of what they call music today, you might have to be told that that's music. Some of this hip-hop or rap stuff, some is like, it's just a beat. So maybe you have to get into that and appreciate it. And maybe some of the people who live in hip-hop, rap world would have to be introduced to ballet or to classical music. It's all, oh, by the way, that's not noise. That's music. But with the exception of these extremes, most of the time you know when there's music being made. You may not like the music, but you know when there's music being made. Some people like sad music, melancholy music. Some people like joyous, triumphant music. Some people like music that sounds like a march. Some people like music that sounds like a waltz. Some people like music that sounds like the still waters. There's different kinds of music. Jazz is also a form of music, and some say it's the ultimate form of music. I'm not so sure about that, but because it's order without any order. It's kind of like a certain level of chaos within music. But all of music is songful, and it's pleasant, and it's delightful. It's very rare that somebody will come and say, turn that music off, it's horrible. I can't, you're ruining my day with that music. Music could be loud, so maybe make it a little lower. But music is music. Music is, as the expression goes, that's music to my ears. But I'm not talking about music here. We're talking about chukim. We're talking about laws. We're talking about statutes. And chukim are the part of the Torah that we don't really understand. There's mishpatim, and this kind of has rhyme and reason, much like the rises and rests in music. There's a logic in music. There's a logic in mishpatim. There's a certain beauty about tradition or edut, testimonials that recall particular historical epochs or events, and therefore we act it out in a certain way. And there's a symmetry to that, much like the symmetry of music. But the one part of Torah that does not seem to be any musical lilt to at all is the part of Torah we call chukim. So why should I do it? Because. Because what? Because God said so. That doesn't sound like music. So how did David HaMelech hear music? What was so musical about that? What was so songful about that? And what if he wouldn't have heard this song? What if he wouldn't hear this music? What would the alternative have been? So let me introduce you first to the opinion of the Metzudas David, who says that the idea of Zmiris, which is based on it's Zmiris Hayu L'chukecha Biveis Megurai, if we are to understand how the song provides solace, we have to understand what it provides solace from. Oh, if we have to understand how music was able to bring David some comfort from what? Because it's zmires bives meguroi. It's music in my house of Magur, which we have to understand. What was the house of Magur from which David HaMelech made music? So Metzudas David says, B'chol mikol makom, in every place, which means, B'chol mahamakomot shahiti garsham, every place that I lived, hayu nechshaven li, it was seemed to me, chukecha kashir v'zemer, your statutes seemed to me to be like a pleasing song, there was a melody to them. What does that mean, a melody to them? How do you hear a melody? This is kosher, this is not. What's so melodious about that? This is pure, this is impure. This is permissible, you may not do that. It's not melodious. And certainly not melodious when you wanted to do something and you find that you can't do it. That doesn't sound like music at all. So Metzudas acknowledges this and he says, what David HaMelech is really trying to say here is, Limadati besimchas halev. I studied in a joyous frame of mind. So it's not music at all. This is not music. In other words, what David HaMelech is saying is, I found joy in every moment of life. And how did I do that? There are times of life that are joyous and times of life that are not. And David HaMelech's answer is, I studied Torah. But when I studied Torah, I did it with joy. And because I was able to study Torah with joy, that itself provided solace for me. So from the perspective of the Metzudas, because Beit Megurai comes from the word lagur, to live, it means David HaMelech said, I always found happiness. That's extraordinary. Because happiness is a passing fad. We're happy, and then we're not. And then we're happy again, and then we're not. In fact, that's the definition of happy. That's the high moments. And sometimes people are happy, and they don't even know why they're happy. And sometimes people are sad, and they don't even know why they're sad. They're in a bad mood. Why? It's the way it is. The Rebbe Rashab writes in one of his Maimarim, it's like the flow and ebb of reality. Just like the waves come in and the waves come out. The wind blows in, the wind blows out. He says this is all a reflection of a spiritual concept called Ratzov V'Shov. There's advance and retreat. This first thing you see in a sonogram is a heartbeat. You see a heart clenching and opening, clenching and opening. And this is the nature. Everything which is alive is in a state of flux. It can't continuously go. If it continuously goes, it goes off the chart. It can't continuously contract, because if it contracts too much, then it implodes. So there's always like this heart beating, or this breathing in and out. There's always a state of movement. And the state of movement necessitates swings of moods. We all have mood swings. Some people have extreme mood swings. Some people have less extreme mood swings. Some people are just mild in nature. And mild-mannered people don't get too happy about anything. They don't get too sad about anything. They're also like sometimes a little boring. And they like being bored. They don't want too much excitement. Thanks a lot. Don't give me any razzle-dazzle. I like it. I'm calm. I'm peace. I'm serene. Highs and lows. Very, very small blips. Other people, when they're excitable, you can peel them off the ceiling. Hoy vey, when they fall down, when they're low, you have to pick them off the ground. There's highs and lows. There's no such thing as easy balance. This is human nature. And there are as many variations of this as there are fingerprints. Everybody has their own way of having moods. Now imagine you could always be in a good mood. One thing is for sure, that's not natural. What would that require, to always be in a good mood? Huh? Drugs. Right. You're actually right. If we want to speak about it in an effortless manner, the only way to always be in a good mood is to manipulate your mood using a foreign substance. And if you don't want to work to find satisfaction in life, you just want to be happy by yourself, yeah, sure, use pharmacology. Abuse substances, and whenever you get in a bad mood, just medicate. So whether it's alcohol or marijuana or cocaine, you're in a bad mood, you just take something to artificially stimulate some kind of joy in your brain, and there you go, you're happy again. But you could speak to any and every drug addict, and none of them are really happy. And the highs and lows, which are artificially induced, become further and further short-lived, and the craving gets more and more intense, and the lows become even lower and the craving to get a high becomes even more intense, and it becomes such a vicious cycle that eventually it destroys the person altogether. So that's not an answer. It's not an effective way to deal with life. As one person once said, being awake is those annoying moments between having sweet dreams. No, if life is an annoying moment and you prefer to be sleeping and having sweet dreams, we have a problem. Okay, so let's go back to the question, since that's not a satisfactory answer. How could a person always be in a good mood?
You appreciate everything.
Here's going to be my answer. And you tell me if I'm wrong. You have to work at it. Really, really hard. You have to work at it. Because it's not natural. And all the things that are not natural have to be worked at.
But if you're working on it, that means that you were in a bad mood, so you have to come out.
Well, you saw yourself getting into a bad mood, and you're always working on creating equilibrium. Incidentally, we all do this without realizing it. Once upon a time, we were all children. And when we were children, we were prone to mood swings. In fact, we used to lose it at the drop of a hat. And then we got it back at the drop of the next hat. Somebody took my toy. I got a new toy. Here I was having a tantrum, sitting on the floor, kicking and screaming. 2 minutes later, I was the happiest kid in the world. And not even remembering that a few minutes ago I was miserable. That's not a normal way to live. If you're still doing that when you're 15, you're in trouble. Or in university in the United States. If you're still doing it when you're 30, oh, now we really have a problem. At a certain point, you're supposed to kind of button your shirt, pull your trousers up, and figure out life. Make it work. So a person says, I can't have a relationship with you today. Why? I'm in a bad mood now. Oh, okay. Sure, honey. I'll see you in 2 days. Okay, I'm going on a business trip. Okay, whenever my spouse gets in a bad mood, I go on a business trip. Is that a normal relationship? Definitely not. What's a normal relationship? We can create equilibrium. Of course, there'll be highs and lows, but there still has to be some kind of equilibrium. And that equilibrium has to be maintained. And if it's not maintained, it's not healthy. It has to be worked at. Everything in the world needs equilibrium. Even your pool in the backyard needs to have the chemicals balanced, or it starts turning colors. Everything needs to be balanced. You cannot just leave things to their own devices. You have to work at it. You have to work at yourself. You have to work on it yourself. So David HaMelech achieved something extraordinary. Equilibrium. He managed to always be happy. He said, that's not possible. Well, not organically speaking, it's not possible. But a person could work on themselves. David HaMelech always maintained a sense of joy. I could tell you, what do we know, but as a boy watching the Rebbe from my whole adolescence, I never saw the Rebbe not shine or radiate joy. I never saw it. It was always a radiant energy. There was always, you never saw the Rebbe in a bad mood, having a downer. And people in the Rebbe's room said they never saw it either. It doesn't mean that there weren't times of agmas nefesh, when the Rebbe had tremendous anguish or grief about certain things. Like I could say the only time I saw it was when his wife passed on during that period of the Shiva. Was unbelievable. It was a different Rebbe. Couldn't recognize the Rebbe. But otherwise, with the exception of losing his wife, even during some very, very difficult times, somehow he maintained a sense of joy. It's not a secret that the Rebbe hardly talked about the Holocaust. Barely mentioned it. His brother was shot by the Nazis. His brother-in-law and sister-in-law were burnt to Treblinka, who he was very close with. The Rebbe suffered on a personal level. He came within centimeters of being, he left Marseille just before the Nazis marched in. Right? He experienced the Holocaust firsthand. He was in Berlin during the rise of Hitler. And nobody knows why the Rebbe spoke about it so little in comparison with other people of that genre who experienced these kind of things, other Hasidic Rebbes, the Jewish leaders who had experienced the Holocaust firsthand and spoke about it almost obsessively. It was a major focus. And some have theorized that the Rebbe was almost like allergic to anything that wasn't joyous. He didn't want to talk about something that wasn't joyous. When he had to talk about something which wasn't joyous, he would always change the subject and say, let us better speak about something that brings happiness. The Rebbe toiled with himself. There's a letter by Rabbi Yoel Kahn, who was the chief scribe of recording all the Rebbe's teachings, when he's just came from Israel just after the previous Rebbe's passing. That's when he arrived, a few days after. And he's just observing the Rebbe, and he's writing letters back to his father. He's a Russian Jew, a refusnik who had been in prison, and now he's in Israel. And he's writing letters back to his father. Those days it was, snail mail. And that collection of letters was printed. It's a fascinating collection of letters, and you see how his admiration starts to grow. And at one point he writes in glowing terms that the new Rebbe, he says, is that Zerbrachene freiliche Yid. He's a broken, joyous Jew. The Rebbe had so much pain, didn't have any children, didn't see his father for over a decade, and then his father died. Was basically starved and beaten to death by the Russians until nothing was left of him. Didn't see his mother for 20 years. He had so much pain in his life. One brother killed by the Nazis, next brother dies suddenly in a very young age. He's barely 50 years old. He felt the pain of every Jew, and he felt the pain of the Jewish people. And he's the first Rebbe to emerge after the Holocaust, like a new, what do we do now? We pick up the pieces. Just 5 short years after the Holocaust. Rebbe Zerbrachene Yid, but freiliche Yid. He worked. You could see the Rebbe working on himself. After his wife passed, after those days of Shiva, the Rebbe was like working on himself, pushing himself to extraordinary lengths. So this is what it means. Zmiris ha'ilichukecha. David HaMelech was a Oived Hashem. He was somebody who toiled on serving Hashem, and he tried to serve Hashem b'simcha. Because serving Hashem b'simcha is the most powerful, most important thing of all. And he worked at it. And Metzudas David says that's the meaning of Zmiris ha'ilichukecha. I studied Torah with joy. I immersed myself in your Torah. And I studied it b'simchas halev. Ukederech hamezamer. He made music out of it. He made music. When he studied Torah, he turned it into a song. He turned it into something that brought him joy. So this is one approach. That's we're talking about equilibrium. A lifetime of simcha, a lifetime of overcoming inner fears, anxiety, grief, pain, disappointment, always serving Hashem with joy. The next opinion I'm going to introduce to you is the opinion of the Ibn Ezer. And the Ibn Ezer says that Migurav does, similar to what the Metzudas David understands Magur to be a place of living, Efot Hagar, like in Hebrew, where do you live? He says, Bebeis Migurav Mishtoimim. When a person is home, they're usually quiet. It's a very interesting thing. When you meet celebrities in private time, they're usually not high octane. The high octane celebrities who are very, very much up here when they're performing, when you meet them quietly, maybe they reserve their energy. I don't know. They're not performing now. Like, leave me alone. They're different people.
They're not getting paid.
Huh? They're not getting paid. It's not part of the career. That it's as the expression goes, let your hair down. It's like the private moments, and it's different. The public persona of a celebrity and the private persona of a celebrity are very, very different. Some of the funniest people in the entertainment industry were the saddest and most depressed people privately. Probably a modern example of them is a fellow named Robin Williams, who tragically took his life. He was severely depressed. So what a rachmanis, what a tragedy. I'm not a big moviegoer, or I don't know much about Hollywood. I'm an entertainment aficionado, but my understanding was he was a very funny guy. And people were shocked to hear that this funny person who made everybody laugh was so sad, so lonely. Like from a different generation, Abbott and Costello was like right? They said they were the saddest, the most depressed guy, Abbott and Costello, these two guys. I think the short, fat guy more so than the tall, skinny guy. He was like a depressed man. That's what they say. It's Abbott, right? Abbott is the short guy.
Yes.
I think so. Costello's the tall guy. They say that Abbott was a depressed person. And he looks a little depressed. I don't know, I watched like Who's on First, a few of these clips you see. He doesn't even look happy, really. He's very funny, but doesn't look happy. He's not laughing. He's just very funny. So a lot of people who are highly entertaining, whether it's funny or musical or energetic, when you find them in their private moments, they're very blasé, not energized. There's not a lot of joy around them. So Ibn Ezer says that Zmiris ha'ilichukecha bebeis megurai. David HaMelech is a king. A king has always got to be on. The king came out to his people, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people were massed around the charisma of David HaMelech. He led a nation by the force of his charisma. How about the quiet David HaMelech? How about the David HaMelech who was not leading an army, who was not inspiring a nation, who wasn't sitting in session or in court? How about that David HaMelech? So David HaMelech says about himself that Zmiris Hayilichukecha. I kept myself buoyant. I was joyous in a time where people are usually not joyous. He said that's what Ibn Ezra says. Bebeis megurav mishtoimim, a person's quiet. This is the way I understand Ibn Ezra. I could be wrong, but I think that's what he's saying. Va'ahepech zmiris. Music is the opposite. So, people say like, let's get the music going. Music is like energy. You turn the music on, it infuses a sense of energy. Every party till you turn the music on is kind of like, and then the music just stops. The music is going. It's like, what's that game called? Musical chairs. The music's on, your emotion. Everybody's on, and then you freeze. So that's the meaning. The music here means in a state of energized. David HaMelech was always energized. And we know, in fact, that David HaMelech slept very little. He would barely sleep a little, and he would return immediately to studying Torah. He was a high-octane, high-energy, joyous person, even in the quiet moments. So it's along the lines of what Metzudas David says, but a little bit different. The first one is equilibrium. The second one's he maintained high-energy joy in his private moments. Okay? Here, music doesn't mean the joy or a song. Here, music means energy, the opposite of blasé or losing energy or being in a down mode. Okay, number 3, and this is this division is artificial. I'm making this division. This again, I could be wrong. This is only my understanding of it, and trying to figure this out, see what it could mean. It seems to me that Radak takes this now to a different level. The Radak explains that the word migurai is connected to the concept of wandering, which is actually this week's Torah portion. What Yaakov Avinu sends a message, his brother Esav, Im Lavan garti, I lived with Lavan. But why don't you say hityashavti? Why do you say I lived? Chayiti, I settled, I lived. What's garti? So Rashi says in one of his interpretations that the meaning is a ger, is a stranger. I was never really at home. Don't think that ever since I got the blessings, I've had a meteoric rise to success and power. I was an outsider. I was a stranger. I was rejected. He's trying to mollify Esav, who's very, very angry about the blessings. So Radak explains it in the terminology of in a state of discomfort or in a state of exile. Because what exile really means is not being able to function in a comfortable way. For example, when they took Napoleon Bonaparte and sent him, and you correct me if they're wrong, the Galapagos Islands, is that where he was sent? Am I mixing that up? No? I'm pretty sure it's the Galapagos Islands. No? Yeah. I'm mixing it up? Okay.
What does Etna got to do with him? Something about the island of Etna?
Okay, maybe it was Island of Etna. I'm maybe mixing up the islands. But here's what I know for sure. Napoleon was not executed by the British. Instead, he was exiled to a lonely island. And he was a person who was very short in stature, but he saw himself as being 100 feet tall. And he had imaginary images of greatness. His delusions of grandeur and greatness were far beyond the grandeur and greatness he ever had. And he had some pretty heavy-duty grandeur and greatness. He was the most powerful man in Europe, in the civilized world, for quite a while, in the Western world. And Alba, thank you. The island of Alba. Okay, I knew I mixed it up with something else. Thank you. Thank God for Google. Sometimes it's Rabbi Google, sometimes it's Professor Google. This is Professor Google. Okay. So on the island of Alba, they say that Napoleon would boss around. There was a few people there, basically his jailers. He would yell orders and scream at them. He would talk to the birds. He would yell at the trees. He couldn't function. He died of a broken heart. He was a broken person. Because he needed a certain environment, or he became used to a certain environment. He was the center of attention. We snapped his fingers and things happened. So they exiled him. They broke him. They didn't have to put him into a prison. They put him on an island. The ships all sailed. What are you going to do? Go escape. Go jump into the ocean and swim. He couldn't do anything. It drove him insane. So that's called Napoleon in exile. They exiled him. The Soviet Union They would take normal people, but they saw that as a threat to the revolution. They would exile them. You take a prince, a poet, you take a doctor, you take an academic, and you set him in the middle of people who are crude by any standard, who have zero sophistication, people who drink the blood of animals, people who they live almost like animals. And you take a person of high culture, a high sophistication. I'm not even talking about what they did to rabbis, even on a non-Torah perspective. Destroyed a person. People came out of there broken. Why? Because they didn't have an operating system. That's called being in exile. I can elaborate this, but this is the concept of exile. So exile means when a person is exiled, they don't have their comfort zone. They're not able to function. And especially when you're forced into exile, you don't feel right. Nothing works. This is, of course, very different from going on vacation, where you love being. You chose to be there. You're having a good time. You wanted to get away from all the things in your life, and you're functioning maybe on the highest level of acuity. You're having a great time. But this is when you're put into a situation which is kind of artificial. You couldn't live like that all the time, but for a little while, it's a wonderful way to escape. This is where everything of familiar is taken from you, but you're not given the added perks to let you function more fully. Everything is taken from you. So it would depend who. To the person whose life is music, you take away their music from them, that's the greatest exile. To the person whose life is books and you take him away, he has no books to read, that would be exile. The person who's a social butterfly and you put him in solitary confinement, that would be the greatest exile. So David HaMelech said he had exilic periods in his life. And Radak says that Megurei means b'mekomot shehayiti goleh, the places where I was forced to be. David HaMelech had to run for his life. He went into En-Gedi, and Shaul HaMelech was pursuing him. He had moments in life where everything was collapsing. His entire life seemed to be up in flames in front of his eyes. He once had to escape, run from Yerushalayim, pursued by his own son. So how would any normal person be under those circumstances? If you had to use one word in the English dictionary, what would it be? Distraught. Give me another word. Huh? Miserable. Another word. Sad, depressed. So Radak actually uses the word depressed. He says, Tachat ha'it savon, in the place of depression, which would be the most natural thing, Shahoya li meharashoyim, from there I had from all this wickedness, this wicked individuals surround me, Bezichri chukecha. When I remembered your chukim, hayali zmirot. This became for me music. I turned it into a song. Hayiti mishtashea behem. I took it I delighted in the Torah. The little Torah, whatever I had at my fingertips. I took that moment, I studied Torah, I immersed myself, I was able to transpose myself into a different place. I put myself into a place of music. So he was able to transport himself. It's an extraordinary thing. To have that kind of ability to control yourself on a mental and emotional level. To put yourself into a different place. And when David HaMelech was in that place, that was his happy place, his musical, songful place. And what was that? His refuge was in Torah. That's where he found refuge. So we have always being happy. David HaMelech does it through Torah. We have Radak. We have Ibn Ezra, who talks about the quiet moments when one is not effervescent and lively, and David HaMelech is filled with joy. So music is a metaphor for the joy. And we have now Radak, who talks about makom of galut. Galut means when I'm not in my natural habitat. I can't function naturally, and yet I find joy anyway. And the fourth approach, this I found in the Me'iri. The Me'iri says that the word magor is also understood in the context of pachad. Pachad. Because we have, actually earlier in Tehillim, David HaMelech says, Magur misaviv, surrounded by terror, surrounded by fright. And therefore, Me'iri says, Kilomar, in other words, Av bizman shahiti mifached, even in times of anxiety, I was worried. Enemies, attacks, a dismal outlook. There didn't seem to be a good way out of this. Hayiti mitasek b'Torah. What would I do? I would find refuge from that fear, from that anxiety. I would engage and immerse myself in Torah. As if I was the happiest, confident, and person who was sure of a good outcome. So he would find this sense of confidence, he would study Torah as if he was the happiest person. He would force himself to study Torah happily. And in this way, he was able to overcome his fears. So let's recap.
So how is explaining the word bevet?
How does he explain the word bevet? That's a good question. I would say that the word bayit could be a place that I live physically, or bayit can be a place I occupy now. It could be like, if I'm in a state of fear, in a state of anxiety, that's the house I'm in now. You know, people's like, come out of your house, come off your perch. Sometimes we use geographic expression to describe things which are more nafshiistic, things which are more like in a rhythm, in a soul-like. Okay, so to recap, David HaMelech, in situations where a person would not be happy, he was able to be happy. He was always able to transport himself from the here and now, if it was a here and now, that would get in the way of serving Hashem with joy. And he always found joy in every moment. What might that mean? Again, just to restate it, Metzudas David says, mood swings all the time, go through life, force myself always to live in the moment, to be happy and rejoice, and he did this through Torah study. Torah study was David HaMelech's secret weapon. Because a person can't just say, okay, I'm going to be happy now. Why? He sat himself down, and he immersed himself in Torah, and he transported himself this way. And this was his refuge. And he did it all the time. He made sure to maintain equilibrium through his Torah study. Or, in his quiet moments, he was always energized, very similar to the opinion of Metzudas David. From there we go to the idea of galut, being in an environment, a physical environment, which disables, a physical environment which in some way would tap him of his energy and sap him of his joy. And David HaMelech was able to pick himself up, transport himself from the physical location he would be. And according to Meiri, we're talking about somebody who's not physically challenged, but somebody who's mentally and emotionally challenged. Anxiety, fear. When he's in a house of fear, he could take himself out of that mind space, that dark place that he's in. He could take himself out of that dark emotional frame that he finds himself in, and he could transport himself into a happy place. And he does this through learning Torah. Incidentally, this morning we learned about Yaakov's wrestling. And in Yaakov's wrestling, there's two opinions, generally speaking. Opinion of Rambam, Ralbag, and many others, who say that the whole thing it's not literal. There wasn't an actual person he wrestled with. It was like an inner demon. It was in a dream, they say. And then we have Rashi and Ramban who say, no, Ramban is very clear. It must be literal. His foot was hurt. So I was thinking after that this is more like, maybe this is like the idea of battling with like mental illness, with dark demons, with inner fears. It was not a dream, it was not a joke. Yaakov had real serious fears, real anxiety. Anxiety which could be crushing, that would disable a person. And Yaakov wrestles with himself all night. He doesn't use any pharmacology, which is astounding. Who can be able to overcome that without any kind of pharmacology? He self-therapizes. He wrestles with his own demon. He wrestles with the Esav that inhibits, and he comes out victorious. Extraordinary thing. Really extraordinary thing. So this could be from a literal physical struggle to a mental or emotional struggle. And I was thinking to myself that the second is maybe more relevant. The second meaning the emotional and mental. Because what if you're not a wrestler? I'm not a wrestler. I don't have big muscles. I don't have much stamina on the battlefield or in the wrestling rink. So where would my strength be? I can't see that. I don't have that physical endurance. But I could see that then to fight against people out to get you, and there's fears and inhibitions, and you know what's right, and you know what's proper, but it's scary. And what will happen, and how will things work out? And to be able to maintain calm, and be confident, and to overcome those anxieties, and do what must be done in the best way possible, with a state of joy, that's incredible. We can all relate to that. So, I mean, ultimately, all of the meanings in Torah are all interlocking. They're not independent of one another. And all of this is true. And perhaps that wrestling of Yaakov with the Malach of Esav, maybe that's the background against which David HaMelech wrestles in his own life. Yaakov is a shepherd. David HaMelech is a shepherd. So maybe there's this commonality. There are recurring themes in the Torah. It says, Kol Mashir Yaakov, Yosef, and what happened to Jacob, what happened to Joseph. It's a recurring theme. What happened to our ancestors, it's happening to us in some way. So this is David HaMelech. And what can we learn from this? We can learn from this to be in a situation of pain, of suffering, of anguish, of distress, in a bad place physically, or just in a bad mood. Not to give up, but not only just not to give up, to be happy about it. To find a way to motivate yourself, to self-motivate, to make every moment melodious and musical, which also answers the original question I just threw out about Parshas Hazinu. There's so many negative parts of Parshas Hazinu. I heard you call it music. I heard you call it a song. But that's the ultimate song. The ultimate song is to be able to see the rests as part of the song, to be able to look at the bigger picture, and to understand that in the grander sweep of things, everything ultimately is part of the melody. It's part of the song. Sometimes there's the sad ballad of the song, but it also is leading us into a joyous place. I had a friend many years ago who was very musical. And he was a violinist, and he understood a lot about music. And he once told me something interesting. I mean, I like music. I don't have a deep understanding of it. He said all of klezmer music is basically one thesis. All the music that was produced. Okay, I'm not talking about there's some very deep melodies, which are soul-stirring melodies. But it's klezmer music. Klezmer music is that basic cello, violin, sounds like pots and pans. The music of Eastern Europe, the everyday music, the popular culture music of Eastern European Jewry. He said it's all one thesis. I'm like, really? It's like so many songs. We have so many of the songs. He says all the songs have an undercurrent of sadness. And they all have a sense of buoyancy and optimism and hope. He says every song, he said everyone I ever heard. Again, I don't understand so much about music, but I started to listen to it a little bit, and I could see what he's saying. I could say maybe he just said it to me, so that's why I think it is. But it does sound like that. There's always a yearning. There's always a dissatisfaction. I mean, the Jews in Eastern Europe hardly ever had a good day. If you had a good day, a good decade, who knows what the next thing would be? They're always living with the memories of yesterday or anxiety of the future. And so there was a lot of sadness, and people had a lot of deprivation. People live with a lot of sadness, but somehow they're always joyous. They found a way to be joyous. They tell a story of this comedian who took his mom to see Fiddler on the Roof. And she grew up in a shtetl. And he said to her, "So, Mom, what do you say?" She says, it's very accurate. I just don't remember them singing so much.
I was just thinking, when somebody is in a very difficult situation and you can self-meditate yourself and overcome it, and when you feel it, I did it, then it's very joyous feeling that you overcame. That's like you feel happy. It's like
this is what you're saying is very, very true.
Problem.
Yes.
I remember I worked on it, and then after I did it, I felt joyous.
Right.
I thought I would never be able to solve this problem, and once I did it, I was so happy, and that's what this is, because he was joyous because of his ability to work on it.
What you're saying is absolutely correct. I mean, I just paraphrase what you're saying for the benefit of viewers, that the idea of finding joy when it doesn't come easy is always somehow richer, deeper.
Yeah.
It's always more meaningful.
It's
that much more special. But Alter Rebbe actually talks about this when he talks about he explains the concept of, he says sadness is anthema. It's always bad. Sadness is bad. But there's an expression, from every sadness there could be a profit. He says, if you're sad anyway, there's a profit to be gained, because tashmi'en yusasem v'simcha. From that sadness, when you pick yourself out of that, you experience a higher form of joy. Right? So you're right. So the joy, the manufactured joy, is much more profound than the organic or natural joy. But isn't that the way life is in general? The more work or effort you invested, the more of a reward you're able to reap. And it's like that. So people are happy. I'm happy. Why shouldn't they be happy? I don't even know. I don't know. Okay, I'm happy. That's not compared to the person who worked on being happy, who counted their blessings, who found those points of light and said, I'm going to be happy despite everything negative. And despite I have every reason not to be happy, I'm going to find a way to find joy in this tiny moment. I'm going to smell those violets, and I'm going to look at the beautiful sky, and I'm going to find. But David HaMelech did through Torah, though. That's the point. I mean, you're right in general, but through Torah, he immersed himself in Torah, and he did so with joy, and that filled his life with a sense of exhilaration. And he was able to pick himself up.
But Torah helped him to work on the
Yeah,
problem.
Torah was David HaMelech's drugs, if you will. But it's not a drug that comes by itself. The drug is just nothing. You just administer it. This you have to work really hard at. This is more accurately, Torah was David's therapy. Through Torah, he therapized, he self-therapized through his immersion in Torah. And what that tells us is that we can do this also through our immersion in Torah. So if you're having, in the most difficult of times, the answer is study Torah more, not less. I've pointed this out before. Somebody pointed it out to me once, and ever since then I point it out now and then, that some of the most remarkable Torah achievements happened under the greatest duress. The Rambam, who in some ways is the greatest codifier of the Jewish people, the one who restated Torah into an age of the next age, more so than any other of the sages in the area of codification, the Rambam was on the run from the age of 9. He had a nice childhood in Cordoba, and then the Almohads came, this fanatical Muslim group, and that was it. He grew up on eating herbs, sleeping in caves. He didn't have a moment of joy.
Stepmother that
Challenge after challenge after challenge. Challenge. Lost his wife, his brother, his best friend died at sea. And in the midst of all this turmoil and this anxiety and inner pain, he produced the most stunning Torah literature of all time. And it's been pointed out that heroism never comes out of comfort. Heroism always comes out of difficult circumstances. Some of the greatest people, both in the Jewish world, but also in the non-Jewish world, came out of situations of deprivation. Look at the United States. I don't know the prime ministers of Canada, you'll forgive me. But in the United States, who's the most famous presidents? Abraham Lincoln, a very famous president. He did not have an easy childhood. He had a very, very difficult childhood. Poverty. His wife was mentally ill. He had all kinds of, he was beset with challenges. He was not a happy-go-lucky kind of person, a person who worked on himself, who worked a tremendous effort and toil. I mean, many people consider FDR to be a great president. I consider it to be a big mamzer, but in a lot of trouble for the Jews. A man in a wheelchair, handicapped from polio, to be able to emerge that way. There's a guy who wrote a book named David Brooks. I forget the name of the book, but it's called Making of Character, I think. And he points out that all these people who achieved extraordinary things, he goes like a whole historical study of people from different faiths and different cultures, and his point is that each and every one of them struggled mightily. And out of the struggle came their greatness. So David HaMelech is certainly a prime example of that. And this pasuk may encapsulate it more so than almost all the other psukim in Tehillim. This is an incredible pasuk. This Zmiris Hayelichukecha. This is how David HaMelech found joy through Torah, and so can every one of us. Now, there's a problem here. There's a problem here. And the problem is a Gemara in Saita. The Gemara in Saita, and I'll share this Gemara with you, and we will have to resolve it, Bezrat Hashem, in our next class. The problem is, Dorash Rava said, Mipnei ma nenesh David. Why was David HaMelech punished? And the answer is, Shakara ladivrei Torah zmiros. Because he called the words of Torah songs, music. And the Gemara quotes this pasuk. And the Gemara says, Amar le'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God said to him, Divrei Torah, shekasav behem hisif einecha b'veinenu, the words of Torah which are so elusive. You blink your eye and it's gone. Va'ata kedolam zmiris. You think it's a ballad? You think this is music? Hareini machshilcha. I'm going to cause you to stumble. B'davar sha'afilu tunekes shel beis rabin yoidenes. Something that even small children, the cheder children, would know. The chsiv, it is written, Olvneka hasle nasan ka'avedas hakedesh ve'iyu. They were not given wagons, the children of Kahat, because the Aron had to be carried on their shoulder. But David HaMelech tragically forgot this. And he misconstrued it, he made a mistake, and he put the Aron on a wagon, and it looked like the Aron was going to fall, and Uzzah was a righteous man, rushed forward to grab it, and because of that he died. So this was a mistake with fatal consequences. Hashem caused David HaMelech to forget something basic that every child knows, because he's being punished. And this is so difficult to understand, because in light of everything we learned today, Zmiras is the most wonderful achievement one could possibly imagine. It's incredible. He managed to be joyous. I mean, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. A Jew has to serve Hashem with joy, and the Arizal interprets the pasuk Tachas Hashalei V'adas Hashem Elokecha b'simcha v'tuv levav. The Arizal says that in the Tochacha and the rebuke that it says because you didn't serve Hashem when you were joyous. Arizal says it doesn't just mean because you didn't serve Hashem when things were good. He says because you didn't serve Hashem with joy. That's why all these negative things happen. And the most important thing is to be joyous at every time. And David HaMelech accomplished this. He scaled the Mount Everest of human nature. He was always joyous. He was in a state of exile. He was home. He was quiet. He was downtimes. He was always up. He was always musical. He was always joyous. And he did it through Torah. How incredible. How beautiful is that? He got punished. Now that's something wrong. If it's something wrong, why is it in Tehillim? Why would you repeat this if it's a bad thing? And why did he get punished in that way? And what kind of punishment is that for him? How's that a punishment? He forgot. How is that forgetfulness, which has fatal consequences for somebody else, how does that become a punishment for David HaMelech? How are we to square the beauty, the extraordinary inspiration of Zmiras Ha'ilichukecha with this jarring statement we find in Masechet Sota, in the Gemara, that says David HaMelech was punished for this very thing? So with this question, I'm going to leave you. And Be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach, next week we're going to answer this question. What could have been wrong with calling? So really, I said this is going to be King David's songful achievement and error. So far we only got to the songful achievement. Right? We're just mentioning the error. And Meretz Hashem, we're going to explain this with God's help next week on Monday in great detail. Lucky for us, the Alter Rebbe wrote a whole entire rumination about this, called Zmiras Ha'ilichukecha, which is actually studied right before the end of Tanya. And there's a long mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek, and a beautiful teaching from the Friedrich Rebbe, and a long sikh from the Rebbe, and it's impossible for me to even try to encapsulate any of that wisdom in just a few minutes, so we're going to be much better off with. Now you know what the Rishonim say, you have an understanding. Let me leave you with this final. I want to encapsulate what we learned today, and then Bezrat Hashem, we'll pick it up next week. The Rebbe, when he talked about this, on Shavuos in 1964, he said like this, in 1965. He said, this is just going to be, I'm reading to you one paragraph here from what the Rebbe said, which encapsulates everything we learned today. He says, the meaning of the pasuk Zmiras Ha'ilichukecha Beis Megurai is in a time when David HaMelech was navinod, moving around, mitultal begerut, Megurai from Gerut, he was a stranger, malei pachadim, full of fears. Here he alludes to the Meiri. Only the Rebbe, here in the Sikha, they allude to the commentary of Rashi in Masechet Sota. Misonav umirodfav, from those who hated him, those who came after. B'divrei Torah, he was able, haya mitaneg v'sameach. He put himself into a pleasurable place, a happy place. He did so with the words of Torah. Shahayu, and I'm quoting, arevim umetukim. They were sweet. They were marvelous, wonderful to him. Like music, like songs.
Because he felt isolated, he felt by himself.
All these negative things. And he picked himself up through the music of Torah. But not through music. Anybody can you pop a CD in and listen to music. He didn't just listen to music. He made music. He elevated himself through a study of Torah. And yet, we have this issue over here. Gemara seems to tell us that there's something wrong. So, Bezrat Hashem, to be continued.